Welcome to Daring to Speak. This channel is about empowering people to improve their ability to speak English, but also helping them grow as leaders. This video is an interview that I conducted with Dr. Hrang Hlei, who studied congregational mission and leadership at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. I asked him questions about his educational background, his ministry experience, leadership experience, and some of the challenges ethnic churches are facing. He studied at Myanmar Institute of Theology, and coming to the United States back in 2006, he studied at Princeton Seminary for 2 years, and then he moved on to Luther Seminary, where he earned his PhD in congregational mission and leadership. He has a unique perspective on ministry and ethnic churches and leadership, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to benefit from this interview. I hope that you'll gain some insights and get some takeaways from this interview. At the beginning of the interview, I mentioned something his daughter, one of his 2 children, accomplished recently. And the accomplishment was getting the 12 folktales written in Hakka into the English language. So congratulations, Jessica, on this milestone that you have reached. So here's the interview. Well, it's so good to see you. And thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and also to be interviewed.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be to have the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah. So before I go into things that I'd like to share with my class, I just want to spend some time with you, celebrating, I guess, with you one of the accomplishments of your daughter, Jessica, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about how it, came into being.
Well, my daughter is interested in, from very young, very early on, she's interested in reading and folk tales and different genres and in literature. And she's been reading like Burmese folk tales and other folk tales. And we, the Chin people also have these folk tales, mostly orally, that we have. And in some Chin versions, published books maybe. So yeah, one day, I think it was last year sometime, like during, just before summer, we stumble across a YouTube channel where the Chin folktale is told, and we watched, listened one particular folktale, and she's interested in it, and then she just wrote down, with her hands and gave to us, and we encouraged her, and then told her that it might be interesting if she continues to translate and then make it a book. And she agreed, and yeah, it happened. And we are really happy to know that quite a number of people, I mean the Chin, especially the young generations, and even other friends, are interested in the book, because there has not been a single book that we know of translated into English. So yeah, we are very excited and proud of her.
Awesome. I mean, I was also very excited about the publication of that book. And so how many stories does that book contain? And also, is Jessica proficient in like English and Chin, is it Hakka or
Hakka?
Chin, Hakka?
Yeah.
So she can speak both languages pretty fluently.
I would say yes. She's interested in language, and she's even now studying Burmese, like via Zoom, with a teacher in Burma. Yeah, there are 14 stories, 14 folk tales included in it. And yeah, she's fluent in Chin, both in Chin and in English. And yeah, she's also excited about it, about the book.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. And she is going to go to college soon, right?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. What grade is she in?
She is in 7th grade right now.
Oh, okay, yes.
So
Okay.
she's been, we have been kind of like, whenever we have a family prayer,
Hmm.
like she always, bring this prayer request to become an author.
Mm.
So this is kind of like a prayer answered, or a dream come true, like a first step.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's still young, but she really wants to be an author when she grew up. So
I see.
here she
Oh,
is.
awesome, awesome. I have a son who is a junior in college.
Oh,
When he was about Jessica's age, he was also really excited about writing and reading. And but somehow, I don't know, when he graduated from high school, seemed like he graduated from that desire of, writing.
yeah,
So
that's I think normal, right? They're still
I think
kids,
so.
and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like I know you are first generation Chin, right?
Yes.
So when did you come to the United States and what brought you to the States?
I came to the States in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
actually to continue my study.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Princeton for
Mm-hmm.
my master's program.
Mm-hmm.
It was for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I first came,
Mm-hmm.
and then continued my PhD studies, and then ended up now in America.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, so I looked at like your kind of credentials, and I know that you studied at Princeton, and you also studied at Myanmar Institute of Theology, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
earned your terminal degree in PhD in Congregational Mission and Leadership from Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what was your dissertation about?
Well, my dissertation was mainly based on the Chin immigrant congregations in the United
Hmm.
States. The topic, the main topic is the formation of Chin immigrant congregations in the United States, and
Hmm.
my subtitle, which is kind of the main focus, I think the methodology brought that up. The subtitle is identifying their ecclesiological identities.
Mm.
So what I was trying to find was these Chin immigrant churches coming to the United States and forming new congregations.
Hmm.
And like from Myanmar to many of them, most of them, Malaysia for several years,
Hmm.
and then coming to America. So they're in different contexts, especially in this new land. I just want to know how they form their, congregations,
Hmm.
and in the process of that, I want to see any kind of like ecclesiological identities that they, uh, without knowing or without realizing, forming.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's my main area of focus in my
Hmm.
research. Is
I see. And um, so what was the methodology? Did you do a quantitative study or qualitative study or mixed methodology?
I use a qualitative
Uh,
grounded theory.
okay, okay.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
So that means you might have used the interviews and.
Yes. So as a qualitative and grounded theory,
Mhm.
as you're aware, mainly interviews.
Right. Uh-huh.
So I spent, now I think I can say, after 5 years, I spent about 2 months in Indianapolis here,
Uh-huh.
and then a month in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, I
So
see.
that's I think that's how much time I had at
Mhm.
that time.
Mhm.
You know, even though the uh, it might it might have been helpful if I spent more time, of
I
course,
see.
doing qualitative
Mhm.
research.
Mhm.
But I had 3 months, and
Mhm.
then doing all the processes that was required. Yes.
Mhm. So
yeah.
how many like church leaders did you interview at the time? Like how many churches did you work with?
Interesting. At first, the original plan was like 6 congregations, and altogether, pastors, church leaders, and then like lay leaders altogether, 94 individuals that I interviewed. And my interview was kind of like in general 2 parts. One is like interviewing pastors, and pastors, and then the second is like focus group. And within focus group, I divided into 2, like the youth and the adult.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been a lot of work.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So, I did my PhD studies in leadership studies, and I also used qualitative methodology, which was case study. And
Yes.
my, PhD dissertation was about, the leadership experiences of so-called 1.5, those who came to the United States at an early age.
Yeah.
Their leadership experiences, and especially in ethnic churches, so Korean American churches, as they worked with first generation pastors, senior pastors. So I interviewed 21 pastors, congregational leaders, and also interviewed them about their leadership experiences, which was quite helpful. And I didn't like interview as many as like 90 or more than 90 that like you did. So that must have been a lot of work. So I know that you are currently serving as a pastor full time.
Yes.
So do you happen to be the senior pastor of your church, or are you associate pastors?
My official title is Director of Christian Education.
Okay.
And my church, it's just called Indiana Chin Baptist Church. We have 3,000 members, including children. So my main responsibility is in Christian education in general. So mainly focusing on children or youth. We are still in the process of how you call it, trying new things bit by bit. So yes, Well, so there are 5 pastors, full-time pastors at the moment, and I am the director of Christian education.
And who happens to be the senior pastor?
Well, the Reverend Dr. Stephen Frecchio. He is one of the board members. I think he still is.
Yeah, I thought he's the one. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, he still is. Yes. We missed him at the last board meeting, because I was elected the faculty rep to the board. So I attended the board meeting that took place back in December. So, and I also currently serve on the special committee, which was put together by the board of trustees. So I've been working a little closely, with the board. Yeah. So please say hi to him if you have a chance to.
I will. Yeah.
Okay. So as a director of Christian education, then you must be working very closely with, as you mentioned, children, youth leaders, and also maybe young adults as well.
It's interesting when we say in our Chin context, director of Christian education, I would say we are not still able to cover the whole concept of Christian education as a whole. So yes, my title and the how you call it, my job description is supposed to be to cover Christian education as a whole, but mainly I'm focusing on children alone.
Okay.
But within our children kind of like ministry, we have like 6 classes from kindergarten to I think high school freshmen, like 15, 16 years old. So yeah, focusing on those groups.
I see.
Yeah, and then we have this young adult or youth, we call it youth ministry or youth group, the young adult groups, different committee, different department.
I
Which,
see.
yeah.
So there are different pastors working for those departments or for those groups.
Yes.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you work with then K through say K 10 or
K
or
to 12, I think.
12
K to 11.
11.
Yeah.
So do you minister? Do you preach, or do you mainly work or help or empower other leaders, teachers?
I would say both, but mainly, helping and empowering other leaders. I mean, within the Christian education, we call them Sunday school teachers. We still use the term Sunday school. So empowering them, and then maybe once or twice a month, I would preach among the children. We have like 2 sessions because there are over 600 kids. Well, when we were able to worship. So one session have what we call a combined service, worship service. So I used to preach in one of those services, and then another session is like a little older kids have combined worship service. And then my title also is like a director of Christian education, GUM pastor. So I am also scheduled to preach maybe once a month in the main worship service. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So when you preach to the children, then do you preach in Hakka or in English?
That's something how you call it, a challenge for us. I think as many other immigrant congregations as well, we have to use both language.
Oh, okay.
The challenge for us is, when we use only our Chin language, we notice that they don't seem to understand fully, especially biblical terms, theological kind of like terms.
Right.
So yeah, we have to use both language as much as we can.
So you speak in English first, and then transition to Hakka, or
mix them. Like for example, I would start with Hakka, and then mix in English, kind of thing. It's not like a translation.
I see.
Or interpretation, just mixed whenever it is appropriate.
I see. So whenever you see fit, you will like throw in
yes
or Hakka.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe the main point, maybe at the main point in the outline, just say in English and then explain in Chin, and back and forth.
I think that's kind of similar to what many ethnic churches go through. I know Korean American churches also have done numerous things. Like they experimented with different methods. At some point they would preach in Korean, the pastors, and then when they realized it's not as effective as they thought, then they switched to English. But then later there was another emphasis on Korean and Korean culture. Let's go back to the Korean language. So there have been, I guess, many trials and errors. Although the longer the history of the church is, I guess, the more English I think they tend to speak. In my church, I serve as the English ministry pastor. So I work with the youth and also college students. So I speak mainly in English, although I can throw in like Korean here and there, which almost have become like a part of the English language, I guess. So which is okay with them. And sometimes when I like switch to Korean, people tend to laugh because that makes better sense than English at that point. I see. So how many Chin churches and Burmese churches do you think there are here in the United States?
Well, in the United States, I'm sure you're familiar with, you might be aware of the Chin Baptist Churches USA.
Yes.
Within that organization, there are 100 and the last data information that I got, 120, around 110 churches with like around 27 to 30,000 members. Yeah. So that's only within the CBC USA.
Okay.
So if you talk about the whole, churches from Burma, like the Karen KBC USA and the Kachin, quite a lot. And I don't, I don't really, have the number.
What do you happen to know the entire population of folks from Myanmar? Like,
I mentioned in my dissertation, of course, that was years ago.
Yeah.
And after that, quite a number of people have arrived. I think the Burmese population as a whole would be a little over 100,000, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think 2019 was the year when we saw most number of immigrants from Myanmar. I think folks from Myanmar were the largest group in terms of the number of coming to the United States.
Yeah, they are. And unfortunately, there are quite a number are still in Malaysia and India, New Delhi as well. Yeah.
So the diaspora population is pretty large.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to your work as director of Christian education. So since you work with your senior pastor and there are other associate pastors, what has been your? It's kind of it reminds me of my time when I interviewed a lot of the pastors. Kind of makes me that remember that experience right now. So what is it like, to work with first generation senior pastor? And I know he must have been also living here in the United States for quite a number of years. So I'm sure he might have been Americanized quite a lot and speaks pretty, good English. But then also his first gen, so there might be some cultural values that he brings to the table and into the work ethic and ministry. Whereas people like you or younger, associate pastors might have developed, other cultural values. So how does that work? What does that look like working with, first gen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to. I don't know, but we have to think about the Chin immigrant churches as a whole.
Right.
My congregation, as a particular congregation, might be a little bit different from others. For example, a senior pastor, he is a PhD degree, and then so many years of experience in ministry, and he has just, and I would say he's it's how you call it, getting old, but still very active in reading and in studying, and he is very open-minded. So our context might be a little bit different from other churches as well. But in general, working with the first generation, be it pastors or like lay leaders, kind of like a go-between the second generation or the 1.5 generation and first generation, is a challenge, I would say. And it's not a surprise, and as you know, but that I don't know how long that challenge will be facing or engaging in the near future. And sometimes that kind of challenge is good. It's a challenge for us to think and to be creative and to learn, how to be patient in leadership. But yes, the challenge is there. and I don't know how long, and I don't know how the next generation will evolve
Right.
themselves
Mhm.
in leading the church, like leading the next generation of the church.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, but yes, the challenge is there.
Right. And unless you get an influx of like new immigrants, right,
Yeah,
to, the United States or even to your church, then, it's obviously, the number of your congregants will dwindle as, as time passes by.
yeah.
There's got to be some plans, set in place to equip and raise up next generation of leaders, and who will be most likely, English speaking. Do you happen to, or I mean, does your church happen to have that kind of plan?
Um, I think I would say that is kind of like part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
The first generation, to be honest, in my observation, I think it's in general uh, true. The first generation is just focusing on maintaining their cultural and ethnic identity as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about the using English language, or yeah, that would be kind of like an issue sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so in short, we don't really have a specific plan in
Uh-huh.
that in that area.
I see.
That's something I have been trying to bring up to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when can we be ready to talk about those important
I see.
future ministry plans.
Right. I was recently interviewed by a group of people who are the what's the name, Naga Baptist
Mm,
Church.
mm,
Pastor Lanu is the pastor, and
oh,
so a couple of lay leaders, and Ragmi Ragmi, she was the one who actually brought us together, and
mm,
so they were very interested in how to like reach out to the community, and how they can go about developing leaders, and so basically they asked me many questions, how
mm,
they could be more evangelistic, how they could be more, how could they do more work in terms of reaching out to the community.
mm.
And I think there were a few other things. And I actually, uh, actually got their permission to record the whole like interview, and which is also available on my YouTube channel.
Oh,
So a lot of times ethnic churches tend to be very inwardly focused
yes.
to meet the needs of the church members, and because there are like a lot of the immigrant members, so that creates a lot of needs, and sometimes pastors and staff tend to try to meet those needs, and because of that, sometimes ethnic churches fail to have like a strong presence in the community,
Yeah.
greater community. And what are some things that your churches do in order to like reach out to the community, the greater community, not just the ethnic, members of the local communities, but also, um, outside members?
You know, that is, honestly speaking, that is also one of our challenges as well.
Mhm.
And when you talk about, ethnic churches focusing inward,
Mhm.
uh, I mean, if you look at it from a positive perspective, if you want to focus on and develop yourself and educate yourself, that might be a positive thing.
Mhm.
But when you talk about the focusing inward, ethnic enclave, uh,
Mhm.
just not really engaging in a wider community, not in specific, but some, one area that our youth has been doing, or did at least the last 2 years,
Mhm.
was like going into the community and engaging, or giving some gifts to the homeless in
Mhm.
the homeless area, and like what do you call it? Their project, what they call like a show.
Oh yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yes, I know what you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah, Christmas. Uh, no, love
yeah.
love project or something. Shoebox. Yes.
Shoebox. Yeah,
Yeah.
shoebox.
Yeah.
So those kind of like small things, but not. Yeah. So, and our church is a member of the ABCGI, so
Mhm.
that would be engaging with the larger community, but not the physical
Mhm.
like community as a whole. So still a challenge for us, because when we think about the church, uh, as you just rightly pointed out, focusing mostly inward.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's got to be a voice like yours, that says, we need to balance out, like, reaching into, our own ourselves, like our own congregation, and then reaching out to the community. Otherwise, too much focus is, on the inward, meeting the inward needs, and in doing so, we might fail to, serve the purpose of
exactly,
a church, right?
exactly.
Just
Yeah,
like the disciples, the apostles, it's not right for us to just serve at the tables. We need to commit ourselves to the ministry of prayer and then preaching the word.
yeah,
And so, but I've been a member of the Korean American Church myself, so I see that pull,
yeah,
that inward pull. So how do we, like, confront that and
mhm,
acknowledge the fact that, hey, we do have needs that we have to meet, but at the same time, in order for us to be the kind of church that we were meant to be, like a missional church,
yeah,
we definitely need to engage the members, the residents of the community
yeah.
often.
One thing I'm hopeful
Mhm.
and optimistic is that the now the 1.5 generation, or the second generation, young young leaders are, how you call it, interested in
Mhm.
engaging in a wider
Mhm.
community more.
Sure. Uh-huh.
So when I say, the challenge that we have working with the first generation
Mhm.
is that the first generation are still the leaders of the church,
Right, right.
right?
They have the money and
And
everything.
the money and the kind of like yeah, the so yeah, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, and that's something whenever I have a chance, even within our church, or maybe outside of our church, a wider Chin community, whenever I have a chance,
Mhm.
I would kind of like always encourage the young people, the youth,
Mhm.
to have that open mind, and to go out and engage in a wider community. That's
Mhm.
very important, actually, to in my view, uh, to survive, I would say, or to continue to be
Mhm.
a congregation and a
Mhm.
gospel centered and a missional church
Mhm. Mhm.
kind of congregation. It's
Right,
important.
right.
We can't just focus only within ourselves.
Mhm. So you have a PhD in congregational mission and leadership. So how does that affect or help your current ministry, and how does that really play out in your setting?
My professor, Dr. Craig Van Gelder,
Okay.
does not really want to use both the missional church and leadership thing,
Uh-huh.
but that's what it is. But that's something for me, sometimes painful
Hmm.
for me, is I have the opportunity to study. Uh, uh, I mean, about leadership and about the missional church, uh, you know, things here in America, and yeah, just focus on America, and how the church has to be able to adapt and engage in communities. Even in my dissertation, I mentioned about it. That's part of one of the reasons I focus on the Chin congregations. Still, how you call it, not really ready to talk about those things yet. It might be because I, how do you call it, I have not challenged my congregation as much as I'm supposed to challenge, but that's something sometimes I feel the pain in myself.
I see. So I think there's a conflict between you as someone who study leadership and mission, and who also who sees the the need to become more missional and more outwardly focused, and you who currently serves as a director of Christian education, and also pulled into I guess a congregation where the values of first generation Chin folks are still very dominant.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that kind of interests me about the kind of leadership that your senior pastor exercises. I know he's been here in the States for quite a long period of time. He's reading and he's engaged, but also I think there's some style of leadership that might be, I don't know, characteristic of first generation Chin leaders.
Yeah. Like the Chin immigrant congregation as a whole, like in general, as I said, the first generation pastors, many of them, I would say most of them, were trained somewhere in Burma or like elsewhere, like 20, 30, some 40 years ago. And kind of like the ministry, the leadership mindset, somehow for some people is still kind of like back in 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. So for my particular congregation, our structure is a little bit different. The senior pastor, the way we structured our church leadership is that the senior pastor is not, how you call it, it's not really, how you call, leading as a senior pastor. We have what we call an in-church associate pastor. So senior pastor is kind of like he's old now. So the younger in-church associate pastor is the one who is in charge of leading the congregation.
So senior pastor is like a pastor emeritus. He's not retired, but he's there.
Yes.
But the major work is done by this associate pastor, in charge associate pastor. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So is he also trained in like Myanmar or in other country, or is he trained here in the United States?
The in-church associate. The associate was trained in Burma and also trained here in America. He got his MDiv and now actually doing his DMin at Christian Theological Seminary in Indiana. You might be familiar with it. So he is, I think, in his final his final year. He's in the process of writing his dissertation, his project.
So then, do all other associate pastors report to that person, or do you all report to the senior pastor?
I'm laughing in that case because not to the senior pastor, to the associate in church, but the way our church leadership is structured is a little bit, how do you call it, a little bit different from others. So that's what I call the challenge we have, uh, particularly for us at the moment. For example, now I am the director of Christian education.
Right.
Yes, my main area of responsibility is the children or education, and at the same time, the way we do ministry, the way we do church leadership, sometimes is not very clear at some point. But yet we're supposed to report to the associate in church.
I see. I see.
That's something we're still working on.
Okay. All right. I don't know whether you're familiar with the book. Let's see. How Great Leaders Think, or Reframing Organizations by Bowman and Deal. Do you happen to be?
Bowman and Deal, I don't have that particular book, but I do have some of their books, but not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the textbooks that I use. I used to use Reframing Organizations, but, because it's so thick, I changed it to How Great Leaders Think by the same two authors.
Yes.
So this they basically talk about 4 different frames, like structural frame, and then human resource frame, and then political frame, and then symbolic frame. So the structural frame is like, rules and regulations and bylaws and everything that bring order and structure to the organization. And the human resource frame is basically about, human relationships.
Yeah.
And the political frame is more is about like agenda setting and power and distribution of resources, whereas symbolic frame is about providing meaning and purpose to the organization, using rituals and events and cultural events, things of that nature. And so there are different metaphors for different frames. And the metaphor for the symbolic frame is like a theater, a carnival, and temple. So rich in meaning and so from my experience of working with leaders from Myanmar, one of the commonalities that I found out was strong emphasis on symbolic frame, because they always they have this cultural events that they love to participate in, and when sometimes the younger generation are not as excited about those cultural events. I know why, because as a first generation, you want to stay connected to your roots culturally and ethnically, and you don't want to lose that connection. But the younger ones, although they realize there's a need, but at the same time they find themselves pulled in to other directions.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that is also the case with your Indianapolis Chin church, or
I think that's exactly true. Yeah, and I'd love to read the book that you mentioned.
Sure.
Yes, I do have some of their book, like How the Board Works or something like that. But I don't have that particular book. I would really love to read that. Yes, I think that's true. Mainly, the first generation being the leader and the authority of the church. They want to connect with their roots and don't want to lose that, in whatever way they can. They want to maintain that. I mean, that's a good thing. And yes, the younger generations sometimes are kind of like sandwiched between those two kind of like cultural contexts.
And since I have students who are from Myanmar, they share with me their leadership experiences, some of the challenges that they have faced, and even still facing. I know these are different, like individually, based on their experiences and based on how much Americanized that these senior pastors have become, or even how much they are open to change. But a lot of times, what I hear is that first-gen leaders are not as open to new things, change, experimentation. So how what are some, I guess, words of advice or insight that you can provide to younger junior pastors or junior leaders who want to work well with senior pastors, work well with older folks, but somehow feel very frustrated not being able to, experiment with new things or bring change to the organization?
Yeah, that's something whenever I have a chance to engage with the younger generations, I kind of like always tend to mention about it.
Mhm.
Uh, what I usually encourage them is to have patience.
Mhm.
Don't lose patience, because working or engaging with the first generation is I mean, it's a challenge for younger generation. That's something we cannot deny.
Mhm.
But for younger generation, losing their patience is not a good thing for the church and the community as a whole. That's one thing. And to have an open mind all the time, because and understanding as well, because the first generations, as you know, they have their own worldview and their identities, cultural identities, spiritual faith identity, or how you call it, kind of like all of these are fixed for
Mhm.
most of the first gens. And for the younger generation to have patience and understanding is a key to maintaining their own congregation,
Mhm.
and then continuing to thrive, in the future. That's very important. And what I usually encourage younger passes is to have continuing education. If you're young enough and be able to continue to study, go to seminary,
Mhm.
if not a degree, but go to some sort of learning and education, have those experience. So
Mhm.
that's something I've been kind of like saying among my kind of like younger leaders, chin leaders.
Yeah. I sometimes, share similar, like, words of encouragement, how they need to be patient, how they need to try to understand their seniors.
Mhm.
But it seems like the change comes very slow. And I think that's another
Very,
reason why we have to be patient, right?
yeah.
Um, so when we talk about leadership, I also talk a lot about followership.
Hmm.
And according to Ira Chilif, who wrote The Courageous Leader, I mean, not the other way, The Courageous Follower, and
Mm.
also Intelligent Disobedience, he talks about how we need to provide high support, like full support of leaders, but at the same time, you need to have um, high challenge.
Hmm.
And in North American context, even like North Americans might find it difficult to, have high challenge, although they might have high support, but being able to challenge and confront the leaders is not an easy thing to do, even for North Americans, more
Mm.
so for ethnic,
Yeah.
people. So, and I know that there are a number of books that also talk about the importance of like influencing up. So you're younger and you're lower in terms of your rank, but there got to be a way to like influence up or mentor up.
Hmm.
Uh, do you think that is really a possibility that that can actually work in like your settings or in any like ethnic congregational settings?
I think that's very much possible,
Mm.
very much possible, especially now. The 1.5 gens, many of them, quite a number of them, are in seminary,
Mhm.
in seminaries, and they have this theological education. They have the passion of sharing the gospel and being kind of like apologetic and among their peers. I am positive. I'm hopeful and that will happen. As I said, what is important in that process is for the younger generation to have patience and understanding, because the first gens, in my observation for the last couple of years, change for them is very, very difficult, very difficult. Very difficult. So, for example, like even for me, like high fats adaptive leadership and technical challenge, adaptive challenge. So when we talk about this adaptive sort of change related issues, the conversation doesn't go anywhere, sort of thing. And in this kind of like ethnic immigrant congregation, sometimes the power or the authority is not necessarily within your leadership structure. Maybe it's like on one individual person, or very minority, one or two people, something like that, kind of like control, not necessarily in like a negative sense, but talking about change and the younger generation influencing up, even though it's still slow, but there's possibility. I'm really hopeful, especially with the younger generations, having seminary theological education, and
that's great. Yeah, I mean, there's hope, right?
Yes, there's hope. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. In retrospect, like in your own life, has there been any like leadership mistake that you made, and any leadership lesson that you have learned? If you want to say share with any like younger leaders, junior leaders, as to what are some things that you must do in order to grow as leaders?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my experience as a pastor or as a leader in congregation is not very long, because before coming to the U.S., I was part of a faculty at MIT, and then most of my time here in America was in 2006 to 2015 was all in theological schools.
Okay.
So after 2015, I became a pastor, and now here I am. So my point is, especially working with, because I first served in Seattle as a small congregation. So based on that experience, my kind of like how you call it, I like studied leadership and theologies and missions and just graduate, and then want to bring those ideas into the congregation, right?
Yes.
So most of my members do not have how you call it, even little, I would say, in terms of theological education. They don't have anything that I have. So I want to.
For what you have to offer.
They're not ready for. They're not ready for what I would like to offer. But so in that, how do you call it, communication, or in that, bringing it into the congregation, I think I would say it's a challenge, because this has to do with relationship communication. You might have those ideas in theory, but in practical, human relationship is sometimes unpredictable. At the same time, you have to work it out, and it takes time. So that still is kind of like a growing, I would say, a growing ability that I am still trying to work on myself.
Leonard And Michael Beck wrote a very helpful book entitled The Contextual Intelligence.
Hmm.
And I'm actually still in the process of reading the book, and something that I also will be sharing with my students next week when we have intensive weeks seminar. And he and they actually mentioned something that is very interesting, and I think something that we have definitely need to listen to, the importance of understanding the context.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about IQ, EQ, and RQ, like the relational
Mm-hmm.
intelligence quotient. And among Christians, we also talk about spiritual intelligence quotient, like SQ. So they talk about this contextual intelligence quotient, CQ,
Mm-hmm.
and using the example of Iskar and Iskarians, that tribe, one of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who understood or read the times.
Mm-hmm.
They knew what to do. So as I was reading up on that book, I began to see how sometimes we fail to really spend the time in understanding the context in which we work and we live.
Mm-hmm.
So like you mentioned, right after we graduate, say from a seminary or from school, with so much knowledge in our head, which hasn't been really contextualized,
Exactly.
So the people are not really ready. I mean, maybe they don't appreciate what we bring, because none of it has anything to do with what they are going through, what they are experiencing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think what they said was quite relevant to even what we are going through right now in this COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we are not really leveling with where they are, like Jesus Christ, who came into this world, and his incarnation basically is about being contextualized. Uh,
Exactly.
so I think we need to start where people are, and then help them like move from where they are to where we want them to be, or where God actually wants them to be,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people fail to realize how they also need to grow and become like Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And if we fail to direct them or orient them to where they need to go,
Mm-hmm.
or if we fail to cast a vision, then they will always remain the same, complain about the same things. Whoever comes in as a new leader, they will say exactly the same thing and do exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's very. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I know I've asked you a lot of questions, and
No problem.
it's almost 5 o'clock. So I think I need to kind of wrap this up. And so, what are a couple of things that you do personally as a leaders in order to continue to grow? Because if we do not spend time investing in our own leadership development, and it'll be very difficult for us to really help others grow as leaders too. So can you share one or two things that you do in order to continue to grow instead of stop growing?
Yeah. You mentioned the word continue.
Mm,
That's something I have been, uh, how do you call it? You know, saying
mm,
for the last couple of years.
mm,
For me personally, and also what I would like to encourage others is, as leaders, as pastors in a church, uh, continuing reading the
mm,
ministry related books, leadership books, as much as you can. Of course, reading the Bible.
mm,
That's something I've been trying uh, to push myself forward. Sometimes the challenge for us as a pastor, as a leaders in the church, is the social media
mm,
thing. We can the social media is kind of the sea of social media,
mm,
and very easy to be, I would say, trapped in that sea of social media.
mm,
Just reading a short posts from Facebook, even though we've been using Facebook. So try to get a good book, a ministry related book, and immerse on it, and read and reflect on it, and try to apply in our respective contexts. I think that's something I have been trying to remind myself and push myself into. And I think that's important for all of us, especially younger generations. Yeah.
So as someone who has a PhD in leadership, like, congregational mission and leadership, can you suggest one or two books that you think people must read, especially, those who are in leadership positions? Would you?
Yeah. In terms of leadership, the Ronald Heifetz, it's kind of like a classic. It becomes a classic one. Leadership Without Easy Answers, and I think a follow-up book is Leadership on the Line. I think those two books that's just comes to my mind. It's a good read. And also related to that is still classic, the Friedman, A Failure of Nerve. It's a bit difficult reading, but still, especially in this time of age, I think that's even though classic, but still a good read. That's something I'd like to encourage our friends to read.
All right. So we are now about to wrap up our time. Do you have any last word that you'd like to share with fellow leaders or younger leaders, who want to not just to succeed, but to be faithful and to stay true to the call that God placed in their lives?
Yeah, it's something that I encourage myself, is to be true to our call. That's very important. To be true to our call, I think is something that has to do with what God wants us to be, and to be as a leaders, and to be in God's ministry, and to always be mindful of what God's up to in our community, and to always be open to anything that happens in our congregation and in wider community, and then always ready to be challenged, and also challenge our congregations as well. In that process, we'll be able to grow spiritually, and in terms of our leadership as well. Yeah,
great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with me talking about your leadership experience and your insights into just congregations and leadership and ethnic churches.